Pulling the door. Is the noise too much coming in, or we're good? You all right? My watching, all right? Oh, well, good afternoon, everyone. Well, good morning. Still just after 11, so good morning, everyone. The session for today is building resilience, and what we'll be looking at specifically in the space of education. And I have this really weird title that I'm thinking about, right? Self-care leadership and the diversity dilemma. By the end of it, in a few minutes, I'll go over some of the goals I have for this session. But before we get into that, I want you to listen to this. And while you're listening to it, if you can tell me what it reminds you of or what you think is the story behind this. So I'm going to play something for you to listen to. The door, right? Yeah. All right. Perfect. That works. All right. So you're listening, and then if you can tell me the story behind this. All right. Good. Anyone else?
A little girl walking through the woods.
A little girl walking through the woods. Good. Anyone else?
I would say
Something connected to happiness. I like that. What else? What else do you think of?
peace, calm.
Peace, calm, good. Anyone else? All right. So the story behind this. In a different session I would have had you close your eyes, but I could get it on a different computer. How many of you have heard of Dr. Claude Steele? Who's Dr. Claude Steele?
He's a professor. Is he still at Teachers College?
I think he might be, yes.
But he put together some article, the biggest investigation that I can't remember the name of it, was about the stereotype threat.
So this here isn't Brent Staples, right, who the whole whistling Vivaldi refers to, but this is a gentleman whistling Vivaldi. I couldn't find a black person whistling Vivaldi on YouTube, so that's why I didn't actually show a video of it. But it's based on the idea that that in Chicago, when Brent Staples, when he was walking through the streets, he found that as he was walking through, because of how he looked, he was big and black. People were crossing the street. Right? They were like, okay, who's this guy coming towards me, and they would cross the street. So what he figured was, you know what, if I started whistling Vivaldi, right, then maybe people won't feel as threatened by my blackness as they currently feel. Right? So this was an example of what Vivaldi sounds like when he whistled it. And look at all of the responses everyone in this room gave to what that sound means for them. Walking through the woods, grandma baking pies. Happiness, right? All of the sounds that you heard from this, all of the imagery that came out of this for you, suggested that it was good, calm, and peaceful. And it worked for him. So as mentioned, Dr. Claude Steele, in his book, when he discusses stereotype threat, he actually speaks of this guy, Brent Staples, and how he used this as a process in Chicago to help reduce the perceived harm that people felt when they saw him approaching. So the agenda for today, we're going to look at what is resilience, and how resilience is actually, because I'm going to get to resistance, how resilience is actually envisioned. What are some of the things that challenge your resilience, right? What depletes your own energy stores, and what are some tools to help you develop your own resilience? So things that I want us to keep in mind. I look at this idea of whistling Vivaldi as an adaptive approach to being resilient. Because imagine him in this space. He's walking and his identity is being challenged, right? I'm not doing anything. I am not threatening anyone. So why are you acting as though you're afraid of me? So how does he choose to be resilient in that space? He decides to adopt a practice that he thinks will make others feel safer around him. This is how he became resilient in that space, because had he not done that, he would have been walking on the street each day, feeling the pressure of people walking away from him, or decide, you know what, this space isn't for me, I'm out. Right? Waiting for this stuff, I'm out. So I want to ask you, when last, and you can make a list of this, when last have you found yourself whistling Vivaldi? Not literally, but even figuratively. When last have you found yourself doing something to make others around you feel comfortable or less threatened? If you can write one thing or one time or one incident, that would be awesome. So when was the last time, or what was the last thing you did that falls into this concept of whistling Vivaldi? Right. Anyone who's willing to share.
For me, I smile.
You smile.
Because I'm a big guy, so when I walk into a room, release the tension. I smile.
Even if there's nothing to smile about, right?
I smile about myself.
You smile.
I practice that all the time. When I speak, a lot of times you're standing next to someone, especially my stature, and eyes forward, you don't really want to engage. Say hello. Kind of breaks it down.
Excellent, excellent, excellent.
With respect to your question of time, every day, because I am the only Black faculty member on staff in the entire graduate school of education at Fordham University.
And when
which is in New York City.
Good.
And we are in 2017. So I do a lot of smiling and speaking softly, reflecting my tone. God forbid I do that.
Right? And you know what? I want you to hold on to that, because we are going to talk about the angry Black person, particularly the angry Black woman phenomena that actually envelopes our education space, right? Anything else?
I just got switched to new school, so when I came in, I had to be very restricted, set my expectations and stuff. But this last week, I had to also let my students know I was human, so I started playing Disney songs and started singing them with them.
We all whistle Vivaldi in various spaces, right? This is how we actually start in developing our resilience, or we start showing our resilience to exist in that space. Because I want you to think of, if you didn't do those things that you mentioned, what would your existence look like presently? Fair enough? If you didn't do all of those things, what would your existence look like at that point in time? So this is a definition I want to move with for resilience. I don't want to read everything off of there for you. Being able to explore what are your external stressors and knowing what those are. Right? It could be something that is said, something that is done. It could be the physical layout of the space. Anything that allows you to explore external stressors become important here. But resilience is also your ability to be able to predict what is going to happen and have a plan to manage that. And before the end of the session, I'll get into how a lot of the literature speaks about resilience being in the space, right? So I'm stressed out now. What do I do right now? But resilient, when you think of what it means to be resilient, prepping for what comes next. So I know that when I walk into a space, so I'm a faculty member at Temple University, my stature isn't the tallest, right? I'm not the tallest guy in the room, right? Many of my students are, because I teach a lot of ball players and footballers. So the minute I walk in, it's like, okay, I see what's going to go on here, right? So very early on in the class, because I teach class on conflict and leadership, At some point in class, I would generally ask one of them to come up when we're talking about conflict and non-verbals around us and how we feel around non-verbals. I would ask one of them to come, stand next to me, and have the class just look at that for a minute, right? Just look at how the difference between us for a minute. I was going to ask you to do better. You know, I didn't know how comfortable you were with that, right? But when we do that, it's part of how do I go about in my classroom there building resilience, because I know, right, that students are seeing me as, look how short he is. Yeah? It's something that comes up because it has come up at different points in time. But when we speak of resilience, we're also speaking about your inherent ability to quickly adapt to what is happening in a particular section of space. This definition is born out of a systems dynamic perspective or even an engineering perspective. And I'm going to give you a much more technical definition right now, right? I'm going to show you this, leave it up there for about a minute or so, and then dissect it just to see how it applies in an education space. All right. This sounds very, in a former life, I was an IT professional, right? This sounds very IT-ish, engineering, yes? So the ability of a system here, interpret that as you, as an individual, right? And the ability of a system to do what? The first thing is to withstand a major disruption. As educators, how many of you are teachers in the room? Like your teachers, good? Administrators. And when I say, and then how many of you have leadership positions in your administrative role? So what's your position, sir?
Student support coordinator.
Student support coordinator.
Volunteering community engagement.
Excellent, excellent. Principal, good, right? So there will be a disruption in your system as a principal, as a teacher, and even in the student's space, there is going to be a disruption in the system. What that disruption looks like, it could be a student challenging you. You're in your classroom space and a student challenges your quote-unquote authority in that space. As a principal, it could be a teacher challenging your authority always, right? A teacher challenging your authority in that space, right? Or even it can come from someone above you, right? Challenging your expertise in a particular area. But when you think of students, what are some of the challenges to students? It could be their peers challenging them. It could be something they left at home that has left them challenged. No matter how we slice it, there will be a disruption in the system and all of these systems that we're looking at in terms of the individuals. So there will be a stimulus. In addition to the fact that there will be a stimulus, you will be impacted. So the point I want to make here is, anytime we have this disruption, there's this idea that once I get disrupted, I should still be able to perform at the level that I started performing at. How? That is not possible. If something gets disrupted, there has to be an acceptable level of degradation, using the word in there, right? There has to be an acceptable level of reduction in performance. And I know when we hear that in terms of teaching in classrooms, like when you say acceptable level of reduction in performance, what does that mean? Does that mean my teachers are no longer in the room? Does that mean as a principal I'm no longer there? Does that mean a student gets to leave it? Whatever that's going to look like, it's going to be different for each person, and based on the situation, it has to be contextual. But what we have to accept is that, and please jump in at any point in time, questions or challenges, right? We have to accept that there has to be a shift in performance. If your computer system breaks down, we expect that it's not going to perform the same way. How are we going to be any different if we have a major challenge to our system, right? So there will be a reduction in performance. But in that reduction, we have to be able to recover. Yes? So there needs to be an acceptable recovery time when it comes to resilience. So resilience means foreseeing that we will be challenged and there will be a reduction, but what is an acceptable recovery time that we can think about? And it's going to be different for various people. You may have a hard, okay, we can't have somebody out for more than 3 days. But then within that 3-day period, somebody might need less time, and that would be determined by that person and you, based on whatever that context is. But to expect that they cannot be that is problematic. But that's what we expect of our teachers, of our students, of ourselves at times, right? That resilience means I'm like the immovable tree. Something happens, nothing shakes me. That is not necessarily resilience. That's only one type of resilience, but that is determined by the type of force or the type of stimulus that actually came and rocked you. Okay, now? So good. And when we speak about composite costs and risks, ahead of all of this, right, we need to understand, we need to make a list of what are some of the things that shape us, what are some of the things that challenge us, and what are the risks associated with it, and what are the costs associated with it. So let's say a teacher has a student who's really acting up in the class that day. What is the cost of having that teacher step out of the class for 5 minutes? What is the contingency plan that we have in place to manage the class in that 5-minute space? Or if a principal has a really challenging space, has a really challenging moment or challenging event that's happening that day, what will happen if that principal steps out of the school and takes a walk around the block for 15 minutes? So one of the things that I do on the side is I coach, and some people are more accepting of coaching than others, right? And to one principal, I recommend it at some point in time in your day. Take 10 minutes and walk around the block of the school. Just walk outside of that space. And she tried it for about a month. And she's like, you know what? It works. But then what happens is we go back into our old patterns of behavior, right? That the minute an emergency comes up, we stop doing that. And before long, we stop taking that 10 minutes, 15 minutes to rebuild the energy store. So when we put a process in place for resilience, one of the challenges is maintaining that process when we are under stress. All right. We know that the education system is culturally challenging and intellectually, it's educational and intellectually a challenge as well. And I'm going to show you some stats in a second. Anxiety and depression, higher in education than in many other professions and industries. Let that sink in for a while. Anxiety and depression higher in the education space than in other industries. And we are the ones teaching people, right? Resilience has to go beyond managing stress, as I mentioned earlier on, beyond preventing burnout. A lot of the literature speaks about preventing burnout and managing stress. We have to go beyond that. To be resilient, we have to examine our own unconscious bias. We come into the class with it. We do it. We come into our workplaces with it all the time, right? And if we think that as people of color, we are immune from our unconscious bias, we are fooling ourselves. We have that too, right? And I don't even need to ask you to respond to this in particular, but just think about the last time you made an assumption about someone and then they proved you wrong. Well, I wouldn't let you know that you proved me wrong, but in the back of my head, I know I was wrong, right? Good. So we come into that. But building resilience also means that we need to interrupt the inequities in our school environment. Because if we are not interrupting or challenging the inequities in our school environment, then we're not creating a system of resilience, or we're not creating an environment of resilience. Because resilience in this case, how I'm presenting it here, is not just for us, but for all of those whom we manage, whom we work with, and including our students. To build a resilient climate, everyone needs to benefit from that resilience that we are building. And if we are not doing that, then we really aren't building resilience, right? We're building an individual capacity to be resilient, but that doesn't help our whole school environment or our whole school climate. So just some quick stats here. 50% quit within 5 years. 2.2 billion spent on retraining, retaining, hiring. You guys have seen these stats before. How many of you have thought about quitting at some point in time? You know, you may not want to raise your hand in case your principal is somewhere, right? Right? So, in case your colleague is around here, right? But no, if you're being honest, sometimes you walk in and it's this high, you're like, no, why am I even doing this? That is when your resilience gets challenged, right? So as we're talking about this, I'm going to pause for about 30 seconds and write down something that happened that caused you to, that challenges your ability to be resilient, right? Something that happens, or think about it, even if you don't mind. You know? Think about something that really pushes you to a point where I don't know if I can continue doing this. Right, so I'll pause for 30 seconds and have you do that. Right, so I don't know if I can continue doing this. So as we are thinking about this, one of the causes associated there is this thing called presenteeism, right? And this is when somebody who is sick still shows up to work. So think of this for a second. So this cause that we're talking about, this 2.2 billion, somebody who's sick and still shows up to work, you still have to manage them if they need to step out or leave half day, right? If they need a break for an hour, you still need to figure out how they are going to need to get supported. All of that factors into our daily costs that we are managing in education. But Daniel Goleman, and many of us are familiar with him, the guy, emotional intelligence guy, right? But he said something that was actually quite good, actually. He said that in terms of correlation, one of the ways in looking at job satisfaction, people who have more opportunities to find positive meaning in their jobs, they actually have greater levels of satisfaction in their jobs, which sounds counterintuitive. That makes sense. Okay. But really, what are we using to find moments of, hey, you know what, this is actually something good in my job, and how often are we able to focus on these things? So as we think of countering these things, building resilience, one of the ways we build resilience is to look for those things that actually remind us of why we do what we're doing. For us as educators, there's a compound need for resilience. I already spoke about the inherent stress, the social inequalities. We know it. We walk into a space, as you mentioned, you're the only black female faculty, black woman faculty.
Only black
faculty. Black faculty, period, in that space. Imagine what you're dealing with when you walk into that space, right? And then the third thing is stereotype threats. Please.
Well, I don't think you can work in education and be there for the kids without first thing that when you wake up in the morning, first thing I think about every morning is something I didn't get to the next day, or a child that incident with a parent. So you do inherit the stress of every day.
Absolutely.
And I do find myself taking not just 15 minutes walks, 30 minutes walks, multiple times a day, just to get outside and get out of the environment, because I have the type of day that you can have it all planned out, but parents and students and teachers may have a different story for you.
Absolutely, 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 right? So stereotype threat is this idea that, so even tying into this, right? And for some of us who find ourselves as the only person in that space, stereotype threat, if you are familiar with it, is this idea that if there's a negative stereotype that the wider society holds about any identity that you carry, when you're about to perform something associated with that identity, there's a chance that, or there's a likelihood that you'll perform lower than you actually can perform. The type of research that was done around this was basically, performance assessment, right? So you give students the same test, math test, and when you give them the test, what it was found is that when a student was reminded of their race, they weren't reminded that they are potentially inferior, right? Just anything that reminds them of their race, very succinctly, this idea that, okay, I'm black, I'm a minority, so the likelihood that I may not perform well seeps in, and the performance on the test is actually lower. Whereas if there were no reminders, and this was so insidious that they didn't tell them it was about race, right? They said, hey, this test is just to test your ability. And just the word ability triggers this idea that, when my ability is compared to someone else's ability who is different from me, the idea is that I won't perform as well. And just that word ability is what caused them to actually perform. I shouldn't say cause, it's correlated to them performing at a different level.
And I just want to highlight that that wasn't just for race, that also
Yes.
went in terms of gender.
Yes.
And that also was specific to math. So they looked at it through, Steele and his colleagues looked at it through a number of areas. So if the student wasn't confident about their math skills, even if they were capable, they still performed lower just because of their internal response, the stereotype.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just to pull in that example, right? When they tested it or when they examined this in terms of women and men in the workplace with respect to math, right? It was found that when they were reminded that, hey, this is going to look at gender differences, the women performed statistically lower than the men. However, when they were not reminded that it was about gender differences, the women performed on par with the men. So this is how they looked at what stereotype threat is, right? That when they had the control group and they had no reminders of those identity differences, the performance was on par as expected. But when there was this identification of a stereotype, then actually performed differently. Anyone wants to ask anything on that? So the question I have is, what are some of the negative stereotypes attached to you or attached to your students, right? So think about that. What are some of the stereotypes attached to you or attached to your students? In my particular program, I'm the only Black faculty member in my particular program. And I do a lot of non-profit work outside. And many times I go around and there comes a moment in the meeting when I'm sitting in the room and I look around and I realize, one, I'm the only man and I'm the only Black person in the room. And in that moment, it takes me a few minutes to actually get it back together. I'm like, okay, what's happening now, right? What do I say now? How do I speak in a way that doesn't seem as though I am threatening in this moment, especially when I'm in a room, only Black man in a room with just white woman, right? How do I actually say something that it comes across as, well, let's just give him, okay, let's let him say that, and then we just move on from here. How do I say it in a way that actually resonates? So what are some of the stereotypes that we all carry with us? So as we think about that, I want to move into this concept of diversity, right? And I'll tell you why I'm moving into this concept of diversity in a second. So I see diversity as it's currently discussed as a challenge for us as people of color. And I want to be very, when I start fidgeting with my badge, it's because I'm trying to figure out what's the best way to say it moving forward, right? I see diversity as it is currently discussed as a challenge for us as people of color. When you hear the word diversity, what do you think of? Difference. Good. You want to say difference? All right, cool. What do you think of when you hear diversity? Different? Race. Good. What else?
Inclusion.
Inclusion. All right, nice.
Other people.
Other people. Good. I like that. We love the other people. Good. Permission. All right. Cool. Fear. All right. That's nice. All right. What else? When we hear diversity, what else do you think of? Huh? Patronizing. Good. Acceptance. So all.
Something that white people do for other people to bring them in.
Yes.
Wow.
I'm just looking for a seat that I can just go take something, right? That's diversity in terms of people of color, right? Even the way we describe it or we have explained it, except for, what's your name, remind me?
Greatest White.
Greatest White? Right. Except for what Mr. White just said there, right? When he's mentioned fear, right? Diversity generally represents, hey, I've checked this box of difference. I have created a space around the table. I'll use myself as an example, right? I'm not going to identify anyone. When I was in one of the positions that I had at some point in time, I won't say if it was current or past, just in case anybody's listening. I was told very clearly, well, but I knew the person who was interviewing me, right? So I think because we had that relationship, they were very candid about it. But one thing that was said was that, you know what, yeah, our group is generally this makeup, and you actually would diversify the group for us. So it was very clear to me in that moment that, dude, you are filling off a check that will make us look good right about now. You are filling that spot that we need to fill presently, right? And the word for that is tokenism, yes? And we're gonna actually, you'll see that in one of the slides coming up. Right? Yeah.
You know, it's interesting because I've worked in all primarily 90% rotation environment. And, you know, at the time, my director made it a point to make sure she addressed the lack of diversity. And then I worked in the 90% African American environment. And the way they approach it is that I'm tired of working with all these blacks. I'm not going to say what they normally say, but if you get my point, so I'm just being honest. So, you know, when we talk about diversity, it's not just black and white, it's male, female.
Yes. Across the spectrum.
Yes. So
yes.
We have to be mindful of that.
Absolutely, absolutely, right? So in terms of that, right, and taking your point, right, in terms of that, if somebody's in a room and somebody in that room identifies as having a different sexual orientation, it's like, okay, we've gotten that, right? If you identify as a different religion, okay, we've gotten that, yeah? So we have diversity presently is understood to be representation, right? And for us, representation, for people of color, representation is insufficient to create resilience. Representation is not sufficient to create resilience. And hopefully you'll see why I said that. A classic example of what a diversity statement looks like. Our diversity makes us a better company, a stronger company, bringing in fresh ideas, perspectives, experiences, and life responsibilities by fostering a truly collaborative workplace. We hear this, oh, what's happening? I'm not knocking this, I'm being facetious here, I'm not knocking this, right? This sounds good, but what does this mean? When I get around the table there, and I'm jumping ahead of myself, is my voice carrying the same weight as someone else's? If representation was sufficient, right, then when I get there, my voice would need to carry the same weight. How many of us, we represent, quote unquote, our grouping, but we feel like our voice doesn't carry the same weight? It happens. And if that is the case, then diversity isn't working for us. Not in that way. All right, so it's seen as positive. Everyone is represented at the table. Just some quick things. I'm only going to highlight 2 of these. 3 of these. Diversity positive systems. Research has shown that. You see that same statement I showed you from the Ford company? If sexism was really happening at that company, women in that company would feel as though, even though some practices were very sexist, they wouldn't feel like the company was sexist at all. Just because the company has a pro-diversity stance. Same thing for people of color. If they have a system to redress discrimination grievances, then it's more difficult for them to see clearly discriminatory practices. And even when there are discriminatory practices, they'll say, well, no, you know, we value diversity. We have this practice in place. So no, I don't think this organization is actually discriminatory. So just the mere presence of the word diversity actually creates this sense that is really, it is inclusive, when technically it isn't, even though in a different context, those practices will be seen as completely egregious. Right? Race is important. We know that. Talk about race is important. We accept that. Diversity is important. We accept that. How many of you growing up in your school environments, race was spoken about very openly? Like race, you know? Like race was spoken about very openly. And I don't have a big group of people here, but I'm still looking for some hands, right? I have 2 hands. Diversity is important. So we need to have diversity. But, and I'm just using race as an example here. And race as a component of diversity isn't spoken about when there's a lot of research to show that when it comes to social identity development, all of the aspects of our identity, we need to talk about those things in the formative years so that we have a concrete identity when we get to wider society. So we are not talking about the very specific things about our identity, but we are spoken about in terms of diversity. How many of you heard the word diversity growing up in your schooling system? Yeah, you hear diversity, but you may not hear about race, right? So we're allowed to talk about the importance of having difference, but we're not allowed to talk about what those differences are and what the challenges or benefits of those differences are. That's a dilemma that we have our students in right now. And last but not least, there's an emphasis on appreciation of diversity with little implementation in a different space. Go ahead, I saw your hand.
No, I was just going to comment that.
Please.
I think it's funny, honestly, that we're in now, where we have a president who is, we have all these people who have all these wonderful statements that say that they're open to all people. But now our president is making all these statements that show that he's not. I kind of see it as and ripping off of the band-aid,
Yes.
if you will, of what people really feel underneath on these statements that they're making.
Right. And on one hand, we respect diversity, all opinions matter, but no, let's not talk about who is advantaged and who is disadvantaged. That creates division. Diversity is good, but talking about the differences is bad. The two things cannot go together. But in some of our educational spaces, this is what our students are told, right? They may not be told it explicitly, but if a student stands up and says, yeah, you know, I'm a black student and what some of the challenges that I have as a black student, a teacher may say, no, let's not talk about that, right? At the end of it, we all have an opportunity to do better.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the student is talking about their identity and then we respond with, yeah, but remember, we all have the chance that if we work really hard, we can all do better. So we quash that discussion on identity-specific stuff in favor of this diversity paradigm, which disadvantages our students because they leave without a clear understanding of what their challenges are in a wider society. Please.
I just was going to comment on that because this is happening actually in my classroom. Like the pledge of allegiance. We have to stand in my school for the pledge of allegiance. A lot of Hispanic kids who don't like to stand up. And it's not because they're protesting, but they're being lazy. So I had a conversation with them and said, okay, this is offensive to me that you won't stand up. Not because I don't believe in supporting you if you have a reason not to stand up, but because the whole protest against the standing for the flag, the kneeling for the flag, there's a reason for that, and that's specific to me as an African teacher. So it's offensive that you won't just get up and you're being lazy. And I had a student who's Hispanic, and he said, I have a reason because they don't respect me. And we didn't really address it, but I'm just saying that the diversity that you're talking about would include talking with him about.
Yeah, absolutely, right? And this goes back, just to use that example, right? This goes back to some of the assumptions that we might be making about groups of people, yes? That, hey, you know what? This doesn't necessarily apply to you, it applies to me. And if you're not doing it, then you're not, but in a conversation with him and maybe others, you'll say, okay, no, we actually share some of the same challenges. And your protest is just the same as my protest against it, whatever that protest looks like, fair enough? So let's just summarize what I've been saying here in terms of we are asked to do this, but we can't. We want to get here, but the means to get there is being cut off. And I mentioned tokenism, so just in the interest of time, I'm going to brush by some things. What I want to argue, and this is going to come up in the next couple minutes, there has to be a critical examination of a power structure for students, middle school and up. And there are already examples of that happening, right? What critical theory looks like and how that argues it. Diversity benefits need to be challenged, and we need to tap into our own power sources. So building resilience. 3 things I want to identify: rootedness, leadership and the source of power, and self-care. So the main takeaways I'm going to give you in the next 8 minutes centered on these 3 things here. Building resilience has to involve a real question as to who has the power and what does that power do to you. Right? Meaning this. When we start talking about critical theory asks the question, who owns the power in this particular relationship that we have? How many of us in our education system were taught to question power? And I don't mean question power in terms of, people like power, but question power. Who has the power in this relationship? That's all.
When you say question,
What do you mean?
to ask questions or to just versus just accept it?
No, to ask questions about who has the power. So you ask who has the power, and then once you've questioned it, how do you address the inequalities in power? You were taught about that as well?
Not just the latter part.
That's the latter part, but the first part. So ask questions,
To not just go along.
not just go along,
To ask clarity.
to ask clarity. Go ahead, sorry.
And just to make sure that I am being a part of something that I believe in.
Okay, good. So make sure that you have chosen to be part of that thing that you're part of, right? But it sounds like that is still something that you actually have a choice to be in or not, right? It could be among peers, or it could be among a group that you actually volunteer to be a part of. What about something that you don't necessarily volunteer to be a part of? Do we get the tools to question, how am I related to this power structure that I find myself in? And if we aren't getting those tools, then when I get that position where I represent that token figure, do I then have the tools when somebody is saying something to me and I know I feel bad about it? Do I have the tools to actually say, okay, why am I feeling bad about this? What power is being influenced over me? What power is being enacted upon me? And then how do I challenge that power in a way that I still feel safe, but I feel as though I am representing my own authentic identity? Many of our students will come out from the education system with the tools to question power in a way that allows them to establish themselves as individuals who have an identity. Say that again?
I'm agreeing with what you're saying, especially when you come from a structure and home that don't allow you to question power, right? And have that. I didn't come from that, so I understand. I'm from inner city Detroit, and a lot of my families look the same. You know what I mean?
Right.
The teacher saying, don't question grandma, you don't question auntie, you don't question the power, so you don't have those thoughts until you get a little older.
Right. And many of us started asking questions about power. Some of us didn't even ask those questions in college, right? It was after we started doing some of our own independent studying that we went, okay, I can actually ask this critical question about who has the power over me in this situation, and then challenge it.
This is something, I don't know if you noticed, but I'm not a black man. But I direct a program and founded a program for men of color who are aspiring educators. And we use the after school space. And it's pre-teaching, so it's before residency or before an alternative certification. And this is one of the very early conversations of it's like naming my whiteness and my womanness in the room. That I don't want you to do things because I say so.
Right.
I want you to have the ability to question me and to talk about what you see in the schools that you're placed in, so that we can challenge the authority and the power there, because otherwise none of this is worth anything.
Yes.
And the other piece of it, so like going back to the tokenism piece, is that we have a rule in our program that you are never, so we have 30 people in the program and you're never placed alone. So they're in a group of 3 or 4 of other black men or Latino men who are there with them to also question those powers that's way better and safer if you're
Absolutely. I saw another hand.
Yeah, I was just going to say that what I find to be interesting, I was not reared in the city. I grew up in a suburb just north of New York City. And my experience was completely different. And I always try to trace it back to, is it because I'm from the suburbs or is it a city thing? Because I never have an issue asking questions. I never have, you just can't tell me no, and I'm supposed to accept it. So like even go to dinner. Oh, well, do you have such and such? No, we don't have that. or they'll answer that they don't have one part of it, but I want to know whether or not you have the other part. So I'm going to ask another question, right? And whereas the person that be considered with me, like, well, they said, no, that's not what they said. They said they don't have X. They never said anything about Y. So I need them to go find out about Y. And I've noticed that, like, traditionally, when I interact with folks who are from the city and attended maybe schools that weren't like strong schools that encourage inquiry or rigor, most people are, and I don't know that that's necessarily a black or white, a black or Latino thing, right? I mean, I don't interact with a ton of white folks who attended city schools that weren't good schools, but I wonder, like, what is that related to? Is it related to the fact, because, in cities, it's generational. So if I had a bad experience in school and I still live in the city, I send my kids to the same school, they're gonna have a bad experience in school. I wasn't raised to challenge it. I'm not gonna challenge it. The people who are in charge of my child's education know best. And so I always am interested in that.
So,
to add to that point, I've always been a person who's never like I don't question things a lot. When you tell me what to do something, normally just want to do it. So for me, it comes from a place of trust, because all the people who told me to do things when I was younger, it's always been for a reason. Like, I've always found a path. My dad tells me to do something, I do it, I'm actually end up happy. If I don't do it, I end up not happy. So it's like, it comes from a place of trust and that repetitiveness, like, of always the person in power tends to have the best interest at heart.
Oh, but that's an assumption.
It is an assumption.
It is an assumption.
And then I have,
It's a dangerous one.
Yeah. Yes. But it starts at home, right?
Exactly.
It starts from home. And so when you're getting raised, you're going to believe that your parents, whether other outside influences say, no, I don't, you can say, I don't think she's raising a child, right? But the child, I'm not going to say, I think my mom's not being a good mom. And so from that perspective, there's a thought process that you grow up with. And it can be environmental. It can be environmental. It can be generational. I think that has a lot to do with it. Because I'm in a position where I have 5 kids. I get to do things differently. My mom lives with me, and she gets to see me do things differently, right? And so we have conversations about why am I doing things differently than how she does with me. And so I get to open up about how it affected me, and how I want to give my kids a different advantage than I had. And so it strikes her in a different way now, right? And so being able to ask that question about power is serious, right? Whether it comes from somebody that we think we love or not. Like we look at our president and we say, okay, he's outspoken about who he is. We have the intellect to understand that. But then the president before, we just looked at him like you rock with him because of the skin color, right? So a lot of people didn't really question. And I'm not saying everybody, but a lot of people didn't really question what he was saying. He was just more Obama, right? And so because by him being black, it was a comfortability of being like, he gotta have our back, right? You know what I'm saying? And so that is huge, and we gotta have an understanding of where that comes from.
Right. So
Sorry.
I know I have like 1.5 minutes, so I just want to touch on some quick things here. So as the person who is in that space, how is my difference impacting the system? Right? This is what a quick critical questions would ask. Who is benefiting from my difference? I'm the only black person in that space, and I know this is my signal here. Who is benefiting from that difference? Am I benefiting as equally as the other people are? And if they aren't, if I'm not benefiting as equally as they're benefiting, then something needs to change. How do I go about changing that? If you've learned about sources of power, and I'll just leave this up for a couple of seconds, take a picture on it. As part of building your resilience is tapping into your sources of power. Whether it be you have the legitimate authority to do so, or you can reward others. And I have really good examples about this in instructor. I'm just skating through it. Expert power. Maybe you are somebody who you are the expert in your field in that area. When you walk into a room and somebody's questioning what you're saying. So when I first got my doctorate, I didn't put my credentials after my name, sent out an email, got some questions. I'm like, okay, I realized I need to use my expert power to shut this thing down right about now, right? I replied, put my credentials after it, okay, we understand.
Because you didn't know what you were talking
Exactly.
Right,
I wanted
before
you
that.
saw that, right?
Right,
So,
right.
so expert power, sometimes we have to tap into our expert power to be resilient, because in that moment, I could have really gotten upset about what was going on there, right? Right, exactly, yeah. Referent power, maybe you've been doing this thing a long time, and people just value you as who you are in that space. Rootedness, this piece here is important, right? If you look up Eric Fromm's research, rootedness is the thing that I want to present that challenges diversity. Rootedness says that for us to actually be resilient, part of it is to establish roots where we are so we can feel at home. So it's actually tapping into your identity. What makes you, what do you value about being Black? Why is being Black important to you? Why is being a man important to you? Why is being a woman important to you? Why is being whatever identity you own important to you? So tapping into rootedness is a counter to just this broad brush of diversity and colorblindness, because we know that doesn't work, right? So the point I'm making is that the pendulum has swung from very overt racism to colorblindness, where there's difference, but we can't really talk about it, to a point where back in the middle, where we need to talk about the difference, privileges, disadvantages, and how do we then mediate or mitigate those circumstances. For us, for people, self-care has to be part of this. And when you think of self-care, so I was going to ask you a question, what does self-care mean to you? And some of when I did the test of this was like, well, yeah, I do yoga, I take a walk, I do all of these things. There are other things that fall into self-care, right? That fall into self-care that help build our resilience. So think of yourself volunteering. That allows you to see yourself as somebody who can give something back to someone else. Builds your resilience for the next time you get challenged with something. Activism. What does protesting look like to you, right? Think of the last time you protested something. Think of the power you felt. Think of how that enabled you to protest something as when you saw another disadvantageous situation taking place, right? Building resilience in the space of difficulty. Mentorship, self-reflection, all of these things are ways in which we build resiliency under this heading of self-care, because this is taking care of the other needs that we have, the psychological needs that we have when it comes to developing ourselves. Did you take away? Dialogue circles, develop skills, I do a process. And I can send this to anyone who wants it. So what I'll do now, I'll just put up the slide with my information on it. So that way, if you decide that you want more of this.
Great session.
Thank
Great.
you. Thank you. So thank you very much, everyone. Questions, anything like that, please feel free.